Welcome everyone, Costin here with a discussion about some of the campaign missions in Age of Mythology Retold that I do feel Microsoft could and maybe should improve. Some of these are going to be very difficult, some of them are going to be very easy, so let's consider some of these options. I'll start with an honorable mention, and certainly one that would have been on the list before the recent patch, but it is A Long Way From Home. So A Long Way From Home was by far and away the hardest campaign mission that was available in the game at launch. They did nerf it, or specifically they nerfed AI. But that doesn't mean that the mission is necessarily great. I mean, certainly it's a lot more doable than it was before because you don't get attacked quite as often, quite as quickly, and you end up in a situation where you can conquer the entire map. But my issue with this map was always the fact that not so much how difficult AI was to deal with, but rather the lack of resources. There's very little wood, very little food on this particular map, and yeah, you do worship Ra and you have that farming benefit, and certainly it works with the changes they made, but just nerfing the AI into oblivion and then abusing things like, oh, I'll just put walls at every river crossing so that AI are less likely to attack me. I'll build a ton of farms and then, I'll just conquer the map. Not particularly great. It also should be stated that it is actually a better tactic in this mission to go for destroying the entire enemy base and then cutting down the tree, as opposed to kind of what's supposed to be your objective, which is to cut down the tree. You're not meant to necessarily defeat Gargarensis. So I think there's some resources that could be better added, some map design changes, like in particular in the middle area and how vulnerable villagers are over there when they're trying to cut down the tree. Like, it's one thing to deal with enemy counterattacks, but it's another thing to have yourself so close to the enemy build locations that they are just going to build a ton of troops constantly when you try and cut down the tree, which is one of the reasons you want to go after Gargarensis' base and completely destroy that. So yeah, just because they made it more manageable does not mean that it is necessarily great. But honorable mention, believe me when I say there are missions that are kind of far worse off than this one. At number 5, we have the Ancient Relics mission. Now, this mission is tricky, but certainly manageable because, well, a full Atlantean army is just flat out better than the Egyptian army. However, you are dealing with several AI factions, so you've got one to the west, one to the east, and then you've got pretty much a Monres faction, so you're dealing with a 3v1 situation. Again, that is manageable. But the problem is your resources are across the river from your starting location. And what I think is not particularly great in this mission is, beyond the fact that you're limited in the heroic age, which does impose quite a lot of problems in itself, but the real problem is the randomization of attacks. So sometimes you will get your entire western base destroyed across the river. No problem, like they'll attack it as soon as possible. Other times, however, you can easily build up that base and get a ton of resources, and yeah, then you get it destroyed. Now, you can, again, manage it, but it is a frustrating situation when you just don't have any kind of, like, reliability and understanding, like, okay, what is the AI going to do? Are they going to attack me and throughout this entire mission at any point over there? Are they not going to attack me? How hard are those attacks? Are they just going to do some damage and retreat? That is the randomization that I'm really talking about here. Again, a manageable mission. Certainly a long one, but it ends up feeling pretty damn frustrating. I'm not going to lie about it. It's like, yeah. But you can make it work. There's plenty of gold mines next to the first relic, so, you can do what I did in this mission. Wood, not really a problem. And food, well, you can build farms next to your initial town center. But yeah, it is a slow, grinding mess of a situation to deal with in this mission. Also, automatons, which you get in this one. Yeah, automatons are a joke of a unit. At number 4, we have Strangers, a no-build mission where you have limited vision and you have limited troops, and you're dealing with a ton of myth units. This mission was never great. Once you get past the charm factor, it's like, oh, this is the underworld, and we're dealing with the hordes of hell itself, right? Once you get past that charming aspect, it becomes very clear that this mission doesn't really have a lot on offer. You do have more troops this time around than you originally did, but the fact that you're constantly dealing with things like Cyclops, Minotaurs, Manticores, and crucially Medusae means that your entire army is something you don't want to use. The shades that you get, you don't want to use those either. So it ends up being a mission where your super powerful heroes, especially Ajax, just clear the map. It takes a while, it's boring, it's not fun, it doesn't offer anything interesting in terms of gameplay. Maybe if you were on a timer, maybe if you had, I don't know, some level of risk that you had here, but you don't have a level of risk. Like, even if your heroes die, it's easy enough to revive them, so it's like, you literally can't lose this mission unless you screw up on the river section, and even then, it's like, yeah, that this mission just is not great. Never has been. Kind of had hoped that they would improve this one by quite a bit, but it seems they were focused more on improving the New Atlantis campaign missions, which, you know what? I agree with that sentiment. There's still issues with some of those, but I agree with that sentiment overall, because, like, geez, those missions didn't need help, but yeah, this is overall just boring as dirt as a mission. Not challenging, just boring. At number 3, it is the War of the Titans. Of all of the missions in the game, I would say this one is easily one of the most disappointing missions in the game. The finale of the New Atlantis campaign, the finale of the game, really. And all that we do in this entire mission, and I shit you not, is like, oh, we just go rush our heroes to the various Gaia seed locations, plant the seeds, and then defend them. And we don't even need to defend more than one. Okay, if you allow Kronos, when he spawns, to get close to a Gaia seed, he will use a meteor. But this is where you can either use a chariot or a centaur, because you do get those reinforcements faster. Either a chariot, a centaur, or a turma, or multiple of these units to just run around with him. Also, you might want to use your heroes. I have to say that the whole mechanic is like, oh, we have a Titan, but you can't deal with him until a certain amount of time has passed in the mission is not a great situation in general. Like, none of the Titan missions are really great. Like, they have made significant improvements with the New Atlantis campaign overall. Many of the obnoxious missions that existed before are much better. But, and even missions that were a joke before that were very, very easy, like the one just before this, have actually gained a decent level of challenge. But this is not a great mission. It never really has been a great mission. And I think, like, it's a severely disappointing one. Like, it is different, and I do understand the sentiment. We don't want every mission to just be like, build a base, get to Mythic Age, all that. But we don't really have that many of those missions with the Atlanteans in this campaign. Like, it gets tiring in the Fall of the Trine campaign, absolutely. But here, like, we get one mission where we go to the Mythic Age naturally, where we expand and we build up an economy properly, and we have to manage that. Just one, when we're dealing with Prometheus, and that's not really the great one. So I think it would have been more interesting if we had the ability of, you know, getting a town center, all that. Also, yeah, Gaia trees, you can exploit that and more or less trap Kronos, maybe. Or at least prevent him from destroying one of the trees or getting to one of the trees. So, yeah, not a great one at all. At number 2, it would be the Dwarven Forge mission. Now, what's terrible about this mission is easily understood. So you have a mission where you can go up to the Mythic Age, you have to deal with a bunch of giants, and a bunch of trolls, and a bunch of ballistas. Now that's not really too horrible. Well, except that the trolls, with their rock throw, their boulder throw ability, are quite capable of destroying your entire army. But that's not really the problem. It's not the enemy units or their upgrades or anything like that that is the issue over here in this particular mission. No. The problem of this mission is the fact that every time you attack the enemy base, and you do have to go through at least a portion of the enemy base in order to win the mission, in order to retake the Dwarven Forge. And honestly, it's actually a lot harder to get to the Forge than winning after that, because you get some very substantial upgrades from the Forge. Like, if you can get to the Forge on Titan difficulty, you've pretty much won the mission, more or less. Unless you don't have an economy to back it up, like if you just use the Ragnarok and you're not getting any more villagers. But for the most part, you will be fine. But the issue is that beyond the troll problem, the enemy has more or less instant construction of myth units, which is because of an upgrade that Hell has. So Hell as a goddess. So what this leads is to a mission which feels very frustrating to deal with, because you will encounter a lot of this situations like, oh, you just killed an entire enemy army, and it's like, here's the next one, and the next one, and the next one. It gets annoying. You get to a point where you realize, like, yeah, just sacrifice entire attack waves just to take down the 9 or so enemy temples. Like, there's 2 enemy temples over here, another one that I destroyed along the way, so that's free, and there's 6 in the principal enemy base. You destroy those temples, you win the mission. And it's also, by the way, annoying when you're attacking this particular section, because, like, yeah, the AI will just flank you from the side and just create even more annoyances for yourself. So you end up with a very long, very grindy mission. And while we can talk about the mission right after this, where you do also face that giant instant construction, it's kind of worth pointing out that while it is obnoxious as hell to completely destroy the giants in that mission, that's not the intent there. The intent is for you to build up enough to break the rock wall to win the mission, whereas here the intent clearly is for you to go on the offensive and then defend the forge. But again, why defend the forge when, if you get to that point, you're probably mythic age, you've got full upgrades, and you've proven that you have the capability of defeating an enemy army, so why not go destroy their base, as opposed to, you know, waiting for 10, 15 minutes to just complete the timer. So yeah, could be better in this respect. I think, like, if they removed the instant construction, even if they gave the AI the ability of rebuilding their temples, it would be so much better in this one. Because there's nothing more annoying. Like, the low-key benefit, the hell benefit, is obviously balanced around, like, the fact that you have limited resources. It's a benefit in multiplayer, undeniably so, but it is balanced by, you know, the costs that the Norse have to pay for resources. But when you take that cost away for the sake of the campaign, and you force the player to deal with that, doesn't lend itself to the best kind of mission design. Finally, and number 1, it is the Rampage mission, where you're dealing with the Titan in the Norse lands. Now, the way this mission is supposed to work, and I emphasize the supposed part of this, is that you're supposed to play on the defensive, defend the villages, keep them alive until the Nidhogg arrives and wins the mission for you by killing the Titan. That's how it's supposed to work. But you have all the necessary combat power to destroy the initial enemy army, keep the enemy Titan perpetually frozen over there using full stack, and just, yeah, winning this mission without the enemy ever getting a base or without their giant doing anything. In fact, you can win the mission quite easily long before the Nidhogg even arrives. Like, over here, I was deliberately trying to wait until I just got bored and just decided, you know what, I'm done with it. Building rams to actually kill the enemy Titan was a bit ridiculous. But why rams, you might ask? Well, you see, the Nidhogg, at least in the original version, not sure how it is right now, but in the original version, I'm pretty sure this is how it was balanced and designed, the Nidhogg does crush damage. So rams also do crush damage, and that's what I used here. But it is a fairly silly situation, honestly. And yes, you can let the enemy build up, but even then, you're not really necessarily going to play this mission long term, right? You're not necessarily going to wait for that freaking Nidhogg to arrive, because you can keep that enemy Titan slowed down. Your heroes can deal with a substantial portion of the enemy army, and you have your own freaking army as well. Like, there's so many ways to make this mission completely irrelevant, and it's quite a shame. Like, the mission before this, the Titan in Egypt, they did a much better job rebalancing in that mission than it had been before. We can thank Giant Grand Games for giving a bunch of good feedback on this. But this one, they didn't, and it's quite a shame. Now, having said all of this, all that I've said in this video, don't take this the wrong way. The mission rebalancing and design in Retold is significantly better overall than in the original game. That is without a doubt. However, it could be better. There are other things as well, like, oh, why are certain missions where you get god powers for free, or god powers given to you for completing objectives, why can't you reuse those god powers, as an example? Why are there so many missions on the Atlantean side where you're limited to age 3 for whatever reason, and you only really get one proper age 4 mission? I mean, yeah, there's more missions than that where you are technically age 4, but yeah, there's also, but like the last two Atlantean missions don't really count because they're not regular base building missions. I understand, like, the original development team was trying to do things differently. Didn't quite work out from my perspective. So yeah, there's plenty of room for improvement, and I do hope that they do make further improvements to these missions than what they've already done so far. But even if they don't, I mean, yeah, the campaign is freaking awesome. Costin here, signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and enable notifications, and stay tuned for more.